The future of progressive radio. This is the Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obadala Show. We're here Thursday, November 29th, talking about a lot of things. We're talking about Michael Cohen. We're also talking about some foreign policy issues. Right now, very happy to welcome in studio. You can watch on Twitter live at Dean Obadala or Facebook.com/Dean of Radio. Our friend Nida Khan is back. Journalist, writes for a bunch of places from Huffington Post to Medium. Also comments a lot on issues about Muslims and South Asians. Great to see you, my friend.
Thank you, Dean. Good to be here. I was about to say good morning. I can't even.
What did you just wake up? What do you just? What's going on? You're living the party life. You're up all night. And no, I know.
I wish those days are long gone. My partying days are long gone. No, it's just been honestly too much news, too much going on, and just trying to keep up with everything is really exhausting. As we were just talking about off mic. Just
it's exhausting. I agree with you. It's exhausting at times. It can be invigorating at times. Like even when I thought after Thanksgiving there might be a little lull, there's not even close. And who knows what we're going to find out in the next few weeks. Specifically, I'm talking about the Mueller investigation. And who knows how Donald Trump responds to those things in actions that could be unconstitutional, illegal. I mean, last night he was threatening to declassify FISA documents to get the Democrats back if they try to investigate him for his corruption.
Right.
I mean, this is off the chart. So,
and it's not even after Thanksgiving. It was even during Thanksgiving when the tear gassing of the migrants at the border and all kinds of stuff happening. And you got to keep in mind, I always say this, that like whatever we're paying attention to, there's 50 million other things that we're not paying attention to that are happening simultaneously through the administration, through different branches of the federal government, globally, you name it. So it's just a whole host of things to try to keep up on. And that is why we're tired.
No, it's interesting you mentioned that because today there was a Trump new rule there proposed that's going to hurt the ACA even more. And it's something that in a normal circumstance I would want to cover.
Right.
Because healthcare is so important. And it's remarkable the Trump administration continues to want to destroy healthcare for the average American while they'll lie and say they're going to help you. And I'm glad Americans see through it. Polls show Americans overwhelmingly think Democrats protect their health care more than we do. So let me ask you, before we get into some of this foreign policy stuff, what is your reaction to the guilty plea today from Michael Cohen? Do you think, what's just your reaction? Then I'll ask you a follow-up. Go ahead.
I mean, honestly, I'm not surprised. And like many other people, I'm sure have said throughout the day, the timing of it is, of course, very interesting right after Trump submitted his answers to the questions from Mueller. So you got to keep that in mind. And this is something that I think a lot of us expected him to do, including probably Trump and his team as well, too. And I just want to say that in addition to the breaking news, there's also other breaking news being reported that apparently, so let's see, this is from Yahoo News, that apparently Ivanka and Don Jr. were also on the Trump Tower Moscow project, allegedly, according to Yahoo News. So this is the project for that hotel for Putin for $50 million or whatever it was, $50 million. So apparently they were in on this as well, is what Yahoo News is now reporting.
That would make sense because Michael Cohen did testify today, and in the pleadings with his statement of offense, did say that he had briefed the Trump family. Now, there's no crime to wanting to build a hotel in Moscow. That's not a crime at all.
Right.
And Trump lying to us is not a crime either.
It's not, which is why I always caution people too that until Mueller and until there's proof of actual direct collusion, I tell people don't get too excited. And I think a lot of times whenever there is breaking news like this, people are expecting Trump to be taken away in handcuffs.
That's the dream we have. That's sort of a dream, reoccurring dream I have.
That this is the end of the Trump presidency, and it does not work like that. So I tell everybody, yes, pay attention, watch all the developments, but take everything also with caution and a grain of salt, because until that direct link is assessed, you're not going to see anything like that happen.
Right. And again, to clarify, and it's something we said earlier, I mean, Michael Cohen, he lied to Congress under oath. So he pled guilty to that. It's part of a plea deal with Mueller. Obviously, there were other charges they could have charged him with. They didn't. They made this plea deal. That's the crime. You know, Michael Cohen lying to the American people, or Donald Trump lying to the American people about having dealings with Russia when they were having it and saying they weren't, that's not a crime.
Right.
The question is this bigger picture. Where are we going? Because Mueller's playing a big picture game, obviously. And the question is, did Trump make a deal with the Russians through this dealing, showing we're play ball, right? Like, I'm going to help me with this, help me win the election. Like, this business is sort of like a symptom of a bigger let's make a deal. Let's work together. We're going to talk business now, but really you help me win this election. We'll do a lot of business. And now they're reporting tonight, the breaking news, not CNN apparently is, I'm not sure if they're confirming. No, they're saying it reportedly, so they're not confirming on their own. The penthouse that Putin was promised by Donald Trump of $50 million. You start getting to the point where, again, I cannot prove it, but it fills in the gap. It's saying Trump was going to give something worth $50 million to Vladimir Putin. That is not just to grease the wheels of a Trump Tower in Moscow. That is for something bigger. And is it for the election?
Right. But that deal didn't go through. That's also important to remember, too. So we have to keep, like I said, keep all of the developments in mind and stay focused and stay on it. But like you said, until that, direct link is proved or that there was some sort of quid pro quo for the election. And until Mueller comes out with everything, we can't say, impeachment. I know a lot of people like to say
we're waiting
that,
for the report on Mueller.
Right. It's best to wait on everything to unfold. That's what I just keep saying.
And it's interesting, too, the day that June 14th, 2016, the day that Michael Cohen and his Russian counterpart stopped talking about any kind of deal was the same day the Washington Post broke that Russia hacked the DNC. And you wonder, but for that, would have they continued to negotiate? But when that came out, it became too obvious. Like, now we're negotiating with them and look what they've done. And if they didn't get caught, perhaps they just helped Trump. They were able to say it wasn't Russia and they made some deal and still Russia helped them. I don't know the answer, but it's clearly not a coincidence that June 14th is the day they stopped talking. And then the same exact day the Washington Post breaks the story that it was Russia hackers that got the DNC emails.
Right. There are no coincidences. Let's just put it that way. I'll leave it
there
at that.
There might be some, but not in this scenario. So let's talk
not
about
in a lot of this.
Let's talk about something that I've touched on the show, but we didn't talk about much, and there were more developments this week. And that's Jamal Khashoggi, who was killed by the Saudis, there's no doubt about it. And Trump's refusal to actually punish MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince who really runs Saudi Arabia at this point. But even more, the backlash this week with a vote in the Senate yesterday. But let me ask you first, what was your reaction to Donald Trump really not wanting to believe his own intelligence agencies about who was behind this killing?
I mean, it's nothing surprising at all. It's nothing we haven't seen him do, in other contexts before. And then especially in this context with Saudi Arabia, with MBS, and with a journalist and a columnist for the Washington Post is pretty much what I expected him to do. It's the exact reaction I expected. And you got to remember that even though it's not the $110 billion or however much Trump was touting.
He keeps making ridiculous numbers, $450 billion.
Even though it's not that, it still is billions of dollars in arms sales that we've been doing with Saudi Arabia for a long time. Actually, even under the Obama administration, it actually was around, I think, $110 billion or whatever the exact figure was. So this is not something that just happened. And the arms and the weaponry and the aerial support and even the intelligence support that we're giving Saudi Arabia on the ground is being used to kill tens of thousands of innocent civilians that have died in Yemen. It's basically the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet right now.
Right.
You have millions that are starving. I believe it's 85,000 kids under the age of 5 that are basically in starvation right now. And you have the worst cholera epidemic, over 1 million cases of cholera. So just absolutely horrific catastrophe. And I know you remember earlier in the year when the school bus was bombed in Yemen and all those children died. So you have stuff like this that is happening on a consistent basis since 2015 that we're supplying. And it's basically like a proxy war that we've been supporting. So yesterday's, what happened in the Senate, while it was encouraging to see that, this is the skeptic in me. I'm not going to get too excited until I see everything go through and until there is some sort of substantive change in terms of withholding our money and our support to Saudi Arabia. So it's a great first step. It's nice to see that happen. And I applaud Bernie Sanders and the other folks that pushed for this yesterday and for months and months that have been pushing for this. But until I see something actually go through all the mechanisms of power and see that change happen, I'm not going to get too excited about it.
All right, and just to bring people up to speed, because there was so much other news going on. Yesterday, the Senate voted 63-37 to bring to the floor a measure to limit Trump's power in Yemen under the War Powers Resolution, essentially saying that now they need the approval of Congress to do anything more. And the U.S. has been involved helping Saudi in this almost like a civil war. It's like a proxy war. You have Saudi Arabia on one side helping the Sunnis there, And then you have Iran helping the Houthis. They're Shia Muslim, and Saudi's helping the Sunni Muslims there. So you have this proxy war going on. The U.S. is involved in it with. So I've had various members of Congress on. Congressman O'Connor talked about this as well, and he's close with Bernie, trying to get us out of it. But from giving advisement to refueling planes to even maybe helping them with targeting, there's been thousands of civilians killed by Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, tens of thousands.
Horrific what's going on. So now the Senate has this vote. The real vote will happen next week, I guess, on the measure, but then has to pass in the House.
Right, which is, the House.
It's not going to happen in the Republican House, but at least now you see them waking up. But a lot of this, again, this war's been going on for years. This is a backlash to Trump, that Republicans in his own party now have voted. They are so upset. Lindsey Graham, one of the leading Republicans who's a Trump lover, was so outraged at the briefing that happened yesterday where the CIA director, Gina Haspel, was not sent there. And the Trump administration denies that they kept her back from the briefing, but the Republicans are like, you did, you kept her back. We wanted to hear from her. So they sent Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, who used to be CIA director, there, and they felt disrespected about it. So they're lashing out by doing this. Go ahead.
Which also, though, about Haspel is ironic because, she's missed torture herself. Remember, she oversaw the detention facilities and the black sites in Thailand when she was in charge of that. So it's ironic that she is the one individual who has heard the Khashoggi tape. So her testimony actually would have been really great and valuable for people to hear, which of course did not happen, which is why Lindsey Graham objected. And I think for him, it's more so because of the process that he may be objecting. I don't know. We'll see, because Lindsey Graham is another one that, he tends to be very dramatic. And his voting record sometimes, actually a lot of times, is very suspect. So we will see what Lindsey Graham does in the future.
Speaking of the tape, I want to play a clip of John Bolton, National Security Advisor, 2 days ago, asked that he'd listen to the tape, the horrific tape, of the killing of Khashoggi and whatever else they had. And let's play clip number 4, his reason for why not.
Let me take the question of the tape first. No, I haven't listened to it. And I guess I should ask you, why do you think I should? What do you think I'll learn from it?
Well, you're the National Security Advisor. You might have access to that sort of intelligence.
Yeah. How many in this room speak Arabic?
You have access to an interpreter?
Well, you want me to listen to it? What am I going to learn from? I mean, if they were speaking Korean, I wouldn't learn any more from it either.
The interpreter would be able to tell you what's going on.
Then I can read a transcript, too.
So you don't think it's important to hear that as the National Security Advisor?
I'm just trying to make the point that everybody who says, why don't you listen to the tape, unless you speak Arabic, what are you going to get from it? Really? The president has spoken to our position on this issue. He's spoken very clearly, and that is our position.
I have cousins who could translate it for him. I have plenty of cousins who speak Arabic fluently.
It's just absolutely, it's beyond insulting to stand there at the White House podium and say something like that. Beyond insulting. Because yes, and he claims that there was a translator that translated it and he read the transcript, but he didn't physically listen to the tape himself.
Even part of it. Why don't you listen to part of it?
You can hear sounds, you could hear the screaming. I mean, I'm sure it's beyond horrific, but that is your job, to listen to that. And for him to stand there and say, oh, I don't speak Arabic, and do you speak it, and asking everybody in the press room, just outrageous. Just everything they do, it's like every day I think you can't be insulted even more, but they somehow prove that, yes, we can insult you further.
Well, you have the smugness of John Bolton, who's a smug jackass anyway. I mean, he has been, people know him for years. He's a neocon. He was in the Bush administration, also very closely tied to the biggest anti-Muslim groups out there. I've written about this countless times. Really bad. Mike Pompeo as well, really close ties to the biggest anti-Muslim groups in the nation, like Act for America. Has gotten awards from them. And Bolton's tied to Pamela Geller. He wrote the foreword to Pam Geller's book. I mean, I can't believe these people.
And let's not forget the Gulf War in 2003. So that's a good point too. You know, they act like there's quote unquote draining the swamp and this is, change to the system. It's actually just a continuation of a lot of the neocons, and a lot of their policies have just been carried through and nobody's paying attention to it. For instance, our wars, right? Our multiple wars. Under Trump, there were more civilians civilians killed in just 2017 alone in Iraq and Syria than there were in the years prior under Obama. But yet there's no focus on it. The media doesn't pay attention to it, and I was very critical of civilian deaths when Obama was in office. But now that this guy's there, nothing. It's all just about, the infighting within the administration, who's beefing with who, what's the latest scandal. And it's just all him 24/7. And we're not even paying attention to what's being done under our name around the world at all.
And Trump doesn't want you to talk about it. In fact, this week, 3 soldiers, and maybe you don't even know this because you got very little coverage, were killed in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And Trump did like 20 tweets on stupid things.
Longest running war, by the way.
And not one tweet about 3 American soldiers killed this week who made the ultimate sacrifice for our nation. I even tweeted about it on his Twitter feed because I go to his Twitter feed all the time and I tweet stuff. And
I think I see that sometimes.
I
do
and
retweet.
People are retweeting it about the idea, like, why would you not even one tweet for these people, for their families, and at least our prayers are with you, anything, and nothing. So that's going on. Do you think Donald Trump's complete refusal to do any real sanctions on Saudi Arabia are because the big game is containing Iran, and without Saudi, you can't contain Iran?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wrote about that months ago. I think I sent you the piece. So this is all basically about Iran and who has power and control in that region. So my piece was basically about how the interests of Saudi Arabia and Israel are aligned probably more than ever before, which is funny because, they pretend to be on the forefront. They pretend to be mortal enemies, but they are very, very strictly aligned. And when the Crown Prince, when MBS was here on his big tour to the U.S., he visited, obviously he visited Washington. He visited a lot of different organizations, including AIPAC. He met with them. So that just says everything in and of itself right there.
And AIPAC is a more conservative pro-Israel group in America. It's not like J Street, it's a more liberal, right?
Extremely conservative.
Right.
Yes.
So that's interesting. So you've got that. It's all about Iran. What about, and I want to play this clip, what about business dealings? We talk about that with Russia, but I want to play a clip of Donald Trump during the campaign bragging about his business dealings with Saudi Arabia. And I wonder, so much of this goes back to business dealings. And if Donald Trump was a Shakespearean character, his mortal flaw would be these business deals that I think compromise him. So let's hear clip number 5.
We need to make great deals with other countries. Saudi Arabia, I like the Saudis. They're very nice. I make a lot of money with them. They buy all sorts of my stuff, all kinds of toys from Trump. They pay me millions and hundreds of millions.
They pay him hundreds of millions of dollars.
That's
from his own mouth.
They did purchase the 45th floor of, Trump World Tower near the UN or whatever. So that is very true. He's not lying when he says that. So this all goes back to, unfortunately, goes back to business dealings, goes back to money. So it's both him personally, what he has gained from that relationship with Saudi Arabia, and then also to the U.S. relationship, what they have gained, also to our interest in the region in terms of Israel and Iran. What we've been saying, that's also what the dismantling of the Iran deal was about too, was to, placate to Saudi Arabia and to Israel. So all of this, as usual, it's all about money, power, strategic relationships, mutual interest. And in the process, it's innocent people that get killed, that suffer, and nobody cares about them. Or people do, but they don't have enough power to do anything about it.
And again, this is another thing that the Democrats, when they get control of the House and they do oversight, which is their obligation, they're mandated in Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution to do that, to be a check on the presidency. That's why we have a separation of powers. We'll be exploring the business relationships Trump has with Saudi Arabia.
Right.
And,
that's
and
if
is
they
he
have,
making decisions based on this stuff?
That's if they have the spine and the backbone to do it.
Oh, they better. Oh, my God. You know how we would turn on them if they
I've
did.
been very critical of the Dems for not having enough of a backbone, which is why we are in the situation that we are in so many instances and dynamics. So if they don't, and that's, remember, the base is very progressive on the Democratic side. They want to see people fight. They want to stand up for progressive issues, and they want to see leaders do that. Now, will these elected officials, the new members, people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I'm sure she will, but will other folks do that as well, or will they fall more in line?
I think they're going to be
but look
dragged
at
into
what Schumer was just saying about the wall yesterday. He was saying, we can give $1.6 billion. We're not going to give you what you want, but we can give this. And I don't think that the base wants to see that. The base wants to see, no, we're not going to give you anything. They want to see you toe the line line. They want to see you stand your ground like how Republicans do. They don't budge at all, if ever, and they always fight and they stand to the ground and they all fall in line. And that's what a lot of people get frustrated with on the left, that Democratic leadership does not do that enough. So I don't know. We have yet to see what happens when the new House comes in. So I always try to leave like a little sliver of optimism and hope. But
I think
I don't
based on the composition of the people who are coming in there, and I've had countless ones on as candidates, that they're going in and they're going to fight and they're going to be tough and they're not going to get along. They're going there to fight and to make a difference. So I don't think you're going to see. I think it's more the old school way. We'll get in, we'll make these deals, and you see it with Schumer. And I think Nancy Pelosi is going to be pushed to be more combative with the Trump administration and to hold Trump administration in check.
Yeah, she already is. That's why, she met with a lot of the members of the Progressive Caucus when all of this whole push to get her out, which was just ridiculous in and of itself. When that was happening, she met and gave a lot of concessions to members of the Progressive Caucus, guaranteed them certain things and promises. So she is listening, and she does, she's not an idiot. She's a very smart woman. Right. She knows what the base is. So I do have hope in her, at least hopefully doing that. So we'll see.
I think she will. And by the way, Donald Trump has landed in Buenos Aires right now. It's on all the channels there, or as I call it, he has fled the jurisdiction. And with this Mueller stuff, they should have taken his passport. I mean, come on.
I know. Apparently, he was fuming on the flight. That's what some reporters were tweeting.
He's spooked and angry. I don't know. I can care less. I don't care about the updates on the baby's condition. This is what it feels like. Oh, the baby's sleeping.
The tantrums,
he's colicky today. I don't care. I care about the facts. I care about the law. And I care about where this is going. So let's take a break. Come back with our friend Nida Khan and talk about an article you wrote about the rise of far-right nationalist groups that are scary in Europe, in South America, and the United States of America as well. Be right back with more of the Dean Obeidallah Show right after this.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
Voting is the most important civil right of our era because the right to vote preserves all other rights. It's not the Second Amendment. It's not guns. It's voting.
SiriusXM Progress. New perspectives, important voices, influential ideas. This is the Dean Obadala Show on SiriusXM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obadala Show. We're live right here with our friend Nida Khan, journalist, writes for a bunch of publications, talking about, we're going to get into the rise of far-right groups. In fact, tomorrow night I have on an expert on extremism. J.M. Berger has a book on extremism. And in the past, he wrote about Islamic extremism in a very responsible way. Now his new book is focusing on white supremacist extremism. And his goal and other people's goal is to try to get law enforcement and the media to cover that issue, to not to scare people about white people, folks, about the idea that you should be on alert, see something, say something, doesn't just mean brown people.
Right. And actually, it means more of the other, because you're way more likely to be killed by a right-wing domestic terrorist than you are by any so-called Muslim terrorist.
But still, the chance of either is less
very
than
minimal,
being crushed by your refrigerator. Literally, they've quantified it. Like you have a better chance. So that's why when politicians gin up this garbage about Muslims, it's a phantom menace. It's not real. And I want to touch on that for a second. During the campaign, Donald Trump made demonizing Muslims one of his two bedrock things. Was demonizing Latino immigrants, big part of it, having, the parents of victims of undocumented immigrant crime and violence, and they truly were victims of that. But when you define all by the worst example, you're fear-mongering. That's what he did. But around Muslims...
You mean they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime,
rape,
that whole ridiculous...
Exactly.
When he first came down the escalator, yes.
And then you had, with Muslims, he did the total complete shutdown, also said things like Islam hates us, talk about Muslims, we know where the terrorists are, over and over and over. You got to say radical Islam. Since he's president, we don't hear him say radical Islam once in a great while, but not much. And you don't hear him this open language demonizing Muslims the way he did during the campaign. What do you think gives?
Well, I would say there's several reasons for that. So one, millions of Muslims are already banned through the Muslim ban. Even though it's a couple countries, it literally amounts to millions and millions of people. So it's like he already took care of the Muslims in a big, significant way. Then by focusing it on just immigrants in general, remember, because he even, when he talked about the caravan, he made a statement like Middle Easterners are in there.
Right,
so when you say immigrants, it's under the umbrella of all of those others and those other people. So we're all thrown in this big thing. So whether it's Latinos, Asians, Arabs, Middle Easterners, South Asians, whoever it is, it's all under that umbrella of the other. So it's easier to just demonize all of them in one swell swoop instead of picking and choosing one particular one. And then also, if you notice what I was just talking about in terms of our conflicts and our wars overseas and how innocent civilians are still being killed by either bombings or by terrorist attacks. But the terrorist attacks in Western countries have lessened now. So there's less media attention on those attacks, because unfortunately in the West, we only pay attention when there's Western people who are killed by those attacks, not when they're people in those other countries, those black and brown countries. So because of that, the language has also changed too, because the media is not focusing on it as much. So it's easier for him to feed into that news cycle during the campaign when there were attacks like the San Bernardino attack. So it's much easier for him to stand up there and say, we need to ban them all. Whereas now the attention is not on that as much. So that's also why it's now shifted to just immigrants and, the caravan and whatever's happening at the border.
That's a great point. If there was, God forbid, a terrorist attack committed by ISIS or Al-Qaeda type people, you might again see Donald Trump just ratchet up.
It'll be back in a second. Exactly.
And I have zero doubt between now and 2020, if Trump does run for re-election, if he doesn't resign or he's not impeached or whatever happens, he will go back to his greatest hits, and one of that includes Muslim bashing. So you're going to see that. So
Absolutely.
It's not like we're going to escape.
You're never going to go out of style. I'm sorry, Dean.
No,
the Muslims will always be there to be, unfortunately, at the bottom of being bashed by a lot of these. It's not just Trump. It's not just Trump. It's a lot of people on the right, and even networks and news outlets. And
there's a fight right now. I just wrote about it for the Daily Beast. It's either going to come out tomorrow or, because of Michael Cohen, might come out next week. About two things, but it had to do with Ilhan Omar, who's elected to Congress. They're going to change the House rules so she can wear a hijab. There's a 180-year rule, no hats at all. But in that article, I noted that in Texas right now, in Tarrant County, I'm probably mispronouncing the county, that the leader of the county Republican Party is a Muslim, and they're trying to change that. And the language they're using, even though they elected him, his opponents now or we want to take the Republican Party back again, and anti-Muslim stuff, like he wants to bring Sharia law. The guy's a surgeon who was elected. He's a lifelong Republican there, but he's brown and he's Muslim, and they want to remove him from a position in the GOP. And that's why even Muslims I know who would be Republicans, who are doctors with a lot of money, who might like the Republican message on lower taxes and smaller government, you can't, in good faith, almost a good conscience, be a part of that party.
Right. And that's a great point, because even though Trump may not be standing there and saying it today, radical Islam at this very moment, he's focused on other things. He may not be doing that now. There are many things happening like that around the country in terms of stopping mosques from being built, in terms of hate attacks, in terms of other people running for office, a lot of conservatives and Republicans running for office who are placating to that fear of Muslims, of immigrants, of the other, and doing all kinds of ridiculous ads, incendiary, speeches, you name it. I mean, there's so many. I can't even go through all of them.
We did on the campaign, and I was so glad Abigail Spanberger beat David Bratt, who he was a Republican incumbent, ran a really ridiculous, hideous anti-Muslim ad. She's not even Muslim. She worked 1 year as a substitute teacher at a school before she worked for the CIA, before she worked defending this country.
Right.
And that 1 year they tried to paint her as somehow soft on terrorism, and she got paid from them. What did she do with the money? This kind of ridiculousness. And I'm glad that he lost. Unfortunately, Amr Najjar, who ran against Duncan Hunter, who's Arab, and he was Muslim when he was young. He converted to Christianity in his teens. That guy ran the most anti-Muslim ad I've ever seen. I had Amr on to talk about it. And Duncan won, but that's not because of Duncan, who's under indictment. That's because the district is so conservative, they rather vote for an anti-Muslim bigot, or they probably don't care about that, to be honest.
Right.
But voting for a Republican meant more than saying no to bigotry.
And this all just goes back to, the piece that I have up today about how societies, Western societies especially, are becoming more and more diverse. And this is why you're seeing, and this is something I've been writing about for years now, and this is why you're seeing such a backlash everywhere, whether it's here, whether it's in Europe, you name it. So you see a rise in all these nationalist right-wing parties that have not only been very vocal and received huge megaphones, but they've actually amassed power, which is the scariest part. Right. So whether it's in Austria or Hungary or Italy, like they've actually attained in the highest levels of government over there, intense power, which is truly frightening. And I was arguing that should be, and I know it's not going to be, but it should be a huge focus of the G20.
Right, which is starting tomorrow. So because we talk about this other issue, let's take a break so we come back and don't get interrupted in the middle of this, because I want to talk about it. And folks, there's a rise right now across the world. We see it with Trump and the rise of, he's so proud to be a nationalist. We are seeing that now worldwide in a way that, if you're a history buff, it reminds you a little of World War II, before World War II, some of these right-wing parties coming in. Well, you had Hitler, then Mussolini, you had Japan, you had other countries that were aligned ideologically that were all uniting. We're seeing inroads now in Latin America, in Brazil. We'll talk about it in Europe, in various countries. And that it's not just an American thing. It seems to be a worldwide move to nationalist far right. And I'm hoping the pendulum swings back. But we're going to come back. Nitha wrote a really good article that came out today on it, documenting the countries in Europe and in South America. So we'll get into that right when we come back with more of the Dean Obeidallah Show right after this. Progressive values are the best of American values, and we need to keep fighting for them to save our country.
Don't go anywhere. This is the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress 127. Welcome to the Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obadala Show, Thursday, November 29th. Quick thing, my friends, holiday season's upon us. Hanukkah starts in a few days, Christmas in a few weeks. People are shopping. Are you looking for a great gift for a family or a friend or maybe yourself? How about the gift of a great night's sleep? How can you do that, you're asking, Dean? How do I do it? Is it Vicks NyQuil? No, it's Boll & Branch, Boll and Branch.com. The perfect sheets that will help you sleep, and I sleep on them. They are luxury sheets. They are the softest sheets I've ever slept on. They're half the price. How do they do it? No middleman. In fact, I can offer you a great deal on it. But first, I will tell you this. They are so confident you're going to love their sheets. You get 30 nights risk-free. If you do not love the sheets, absolutely love them, full refund, no questions asked. But I sleep on them. I'm telling you, you're going to love them. Every time I wash them, they get softer and they still look great. And here's the great deal for the holidays. Take $50 off your first set of sheets and free shipping. That's right. Go to Boll & Branch, Boll and Branch.com. And when you check out, there's a little box for promo code. Type in Dean right there, $50 off. And when you get them shipped to you, because I have, they come in a beautiful box. It's like already wrapped as a present. And when you open it up, it is a glorious set of sheets that they look like $1,000 sheets. I mean, they look remarkable. BollandBranch.com, Boll and Branch.com, promo code Dean. So, Nitha, so you were touching on some breaking news. Every commercial, there's breaking news during the time of Trump. So you mentioned that multiple sources have confirmed to Yahoo News that Ivanka and Don Jr. were working to make the Trump Tower Moscow reality. Well, more breaking news now says, this is a source, so going on a source, that Mueller has asked questions about Ivanka and Don Jr.'s work on Trump Tower in Moscow.
I'm sure he did. Yeah.
I imagine they did, and they would. I can only imagine in Trump's little brain the idea of what happens.
Well, this is why he was freaking out on the flight, you know, according to the reporters, and we were making fun of that earlier. But I'm sure he was throwing a tantrum and freaking out on the plane, especially with regards to Ivanka. You know,
that's his baby.
I was just going to say that.
I was telling Nitha, I saw Trump, there was video of him going up the stairs to Air Force One with Melania. And here's the weird thing. She actually put her arm like on Trump's back, and then he put his arm on her. They almost were arm in arm, and he kissed her on the cheek. And I think she's like, this is last time we used plane before you were indicted.
That's
so
a horrible
wrong.
impression. I got to watch the video. I didn't see it.
Maybe she's like, do I keep playing when you're gone? No. It's like, maybe where she's from, like the wife could be president. Doesn't happen here. And that impression was horrible, and probably I'm sure some progressives will be upset about it. But
actually, a whole bunch of conservatives always get upset that, you know,
I should be best. I should listen to Ivanka. I should be best, which is missing an article or a preposition. There's something wrong with be best.
Yeah, it's missing the or
right, it's missing an article.
Yeah, it's just,
all right, so let's talk about your article, which is more important at this time than having fun at the expense of Melania's accent. I come from a family of people with accents, so I only do it out of love. That
we know.
Sense? So,
plus, you're a comedian. You're allowed to make fun of everything.
So let's talk about your article here about the rise of right-wing powers in Europe. But tell people, highlight a few in Europe that concern you the most.
So I pulled from my piece, let's see, so some stats here. So in Austria, the right-wing anti-immigrant conservative Freedom Party, which, by the way, was formed in 1956 by a former officer in the SS, won 26% of the vote last year. 26%. Then you have over in Germany, the right-wing Alternative for Germany won 12.6% of the nation's most recent election. In Hungary, the far right won 19% of the vote in their last election. In Denmark, you know, from Denmark to Switzerland, the right-wing Swiss People's Party won 29% of the vote in 2015. And then you mentioned Brazil earlier. So with Bolsonaro, and I always mess up his name. I don't even know if that's how you say Bolsonaro.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good, right? Sounds about right.
Sounds good.
So this is somebody, I mean, his rhetoric against minorities, people of color, LGBTQ, you name it, women, has been so vile that the attorney general actually charged him with inciting hatred and discrimination against blacks, women, indigenous communities, and the LGBTQ community before. That's how bad it is. So this amalgamation and rise of right-wing nationalism that you see everywhere, you see it
And Trump
here.
calls himself a nationalist now and proud of it.
Well, yeah, and not to mention, all these people who've been emboldened because of the rhetoric and actions. And you got to remember, it's not only the divisive rhetoric, it's also policies that back up the divisive rhetoric, like separation at the border, like the Muslim ban, like so many things that they're doing, a backlog in immigration, legal immigration, a backlog in people obtaining citizenship, all kinds of things that are taking place. So you see that here, you see it across Europe, you see it in Brazil, and it's truly frightening. And at the same time, and I also mentioned this in the piece, that you have an intense rise in hate crimes that are happening, again, both here and abroad. So here, according to the FBI's own stats, there was a 17% increase. And remember, this FBI stats are actually lower than the true number for multiple reasons, because there are police departments around the country that actually don't report the numbers to the FBI or don't even keep track of it themselves.
Right.
Then you have a lot of communities that are afraid to come out and report, whether it be because they don't know how to navigate the system or there's a language barrier. So you have all of that in there. So these numbers are on the low end. And you're seeing a rise in countries in Europe as well, too. In a place like Germany in 2017, you saw an average of about 4 anti-Semitic attacks in 2017. And there was about 950 anti-Muslim attacks in Germany in 2017 as well. And you're seeing this in Italy, you're seeing this, you name it, it's happening everywhere. So it's a very scary dynamic. And the problem is the people, the communities, the marginalized communities that are suffering the most from this intense rise in hate crimes and attacks that are happening, they're the ones who oftentimes have the least voice. So whether it's the immigrant communities or the Muslim communities or, people of color, whatever have you, they're the ones who don't have the platforms. They're the ones who don't have, nationally syndicated shows,
Right.
or on networks or anywhere for that matter, a lot of times, and they're not able to voice their concerns about this, and people are just not paying enough attention to it. So you have the hate crimes happening, and then you have the rise in the nationalist parties that have amassed power in government, and it's something truly frightening and something that people around the world need to pay attention to. People who want to coexist peacefully and live in harmony and believe in togetherness and any other great adjective you could think of, we're the ones who really need to push back against this stuff, because if we don't, it's going to be too late. And I hate to, I'm not trying to fearmonger. This is a reality, because this is not something that just happened yesterday. This has been happening for many years now, and it's accelerated in the past couple of years.
So in your view, clearly the rise of these nationalists who are spewing rhetoric that are demonizing immigrants, and like in America, demonizing Muslims, demonizing immigrants, and then we're seeing a spike in hate crime. That's completely connected in your view.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of this, like in Europe, for instance, happened when so many refugees and migrants came in because of what's happening in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and they came into or were allowed into Europe. And remember, again, and I go back to this point, I think I mentioned this on your show years ago when I was on, what's happening in those countries, so European countries and us, we're directly involved in the destabilization of a lot of these places. And when the innocent civilians, when the refugees and the migrants have nowhere to go and have been going into other countries, that's where you're seeing this intense pushback happen. And, the anti-Muslim stuff, the anti-immigrant stuff has accelerated because of this in 2015 and onward. So you're seeing that dynamic play out, and this is why these right-wing nationalist parties have come to power now, and why it's resonated with so many people. And it's also tied into the fact that there wasn't enough accountability with the 2008 financial crisis. So there is truth to that, where there were people hurting, and you saw that, across the world too. And there wasn't enough accountability in that regard. And then you had these parties and these politicians and figures, come up and say, oh, it's because of those people. It's because of those immigrants. And unfortunately, that resonated with a lot of people. And fear-mongering works way too well. We've seen that throughout history. And this is why we are where we are. And I keep warning people that when you look at something like the horrors that happened with Nazi Germany and during the Holocaust, that stuff didn't happen overnight. It was a long time of demonization, of othering, reporting of all kinds of disgusting things. And then we saw it taken to that horrible level. And you got to remember, too, what we're seeing, for instance, like at the border with these, I wrote about the Tornillo camp in Texas, right? So right now, I know there was reporting on it this week again, too, that it was initially supposed to be a temporary housing place for migrant teens. And it grew to about, I think it houses now 2,500 people, and it's supposed to quadruple in size. And there's actually, there are bases that can house tens of thousands of people that are already being constructed, and many have been constructed in places like Arizona, California, and Texas. And this is where they're going to potentially house tens of thousands of migrants. And remember, what happens to one group today can very easily happen to you the next day. So there's a lot of people who think, oh, well, I'm not an illegal. I'm not, here. I'm okay, and I don't need to pay attention to this. Well, you don't know where that's going to stop. And the same thing with something like troops being sent to the border, being allowed to authorize to shoot at migrants.
Right.
That can easily happen to another group too. When you militarize things, when you give power to certain groups and entities and to the army, that can also be turned around and used in other dynamics as well too. So this is why people need to pay attention.
So you were saying in your article that you wish that they would raise this at the G20, which is going to go on tomorrow, et cetera. Mm-hmm. What can they do? I mean, Trump is part of the problem. So what do you do?
He's part of the problem. I mean, even Putin has completely pandered and placated to the right wing as well too in Russia. That's all part of this too, that maintaining of white power. And I guess the title of my piece was more sarcastic, tongue-in-cheek, that this is what they need to pay attention to, because we know they're not going to. But and I also mentioned this in the piece as well, that it's disturbing at the same time that people like Angela Merkel, the chancellor in Germany, and even Macron in France, they're slowly changing their stance on things like immigration as well too, in order to placate to those people and those parties that are now in power. So they're, changing in France. They voted to change the asylum rules. So you have things like that happening as well, too. And I'm like, you know what? It's time people really need to wake up and not only talk about this, but get their folks elected to push back against this and unite in causes around these issues. Because if you don't, it's just going to accelerate. And we're going to see more of this, of course, when Donald Trump runs in 2020. You're going to see in countries around the world, you're going to see more and more of this. And the fact that this happened in Brazil is truly frightening, the fourth largest democracy.
If the Democrats had not won that House, I would be even more worried about what Trump would do. But all right, let's take a break. We'll come back for the last couple of minutes here on the Dean Obeidallah Show. I'm here with my friend Nida Khan, journalist. Check out her stuff. I tweeted out her article we were just talking about at Dean Obeidallah. Be right back after this quick break.
Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress 127. Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obadala Show, with our friend Nida Khan here, writer, journalist. So Nida, what do you? Let's
with all the happy
up.
news.
Right, well, so instead of we covered the world, we covered Jamal Khashoggi, we covered what's going on in Europe. Let's finish up here domestically. What do you think happens in the near term? There's no wrong answer. What do you predict next with Robert Mueller and this investigation? Do you think he indicts someone else pleads guilty, or something just off the charts? I'm not going to try to guide you.
I predict all of the above.
Do you think so? But someone big? Do you think?
I think somebody will be indicted. Absolutely. There will
Donald
be more.
Trump Jr.?
I don't know. I'm not going to speculate yet on. I'm not going to say it publicly. Let's just put it that way.
Because you try to be a journalist, I understand. I don't have to pretend to be a journalist. I write articles.
I am a journalist. Thank you very much.
No, you are a journalist, and I try. I don't even pretend to be a journalist. To me, I think we get the report. I'm not sure when, but I think you're going to wait till the Democrats take the House. And you might see it then. But I had Danny Savalas the other night, the lawyer, and he's like, it could be another year because the Russian finance stuff is not in America.
Yeah.
You're dealing with finances from there and here, and now we're learning new things from Michael Cohen. Yeah. And it could be a year and a year and a half.
I think it is it's going to go well into 2019. And you know what's going to happen in 2019? Campaign for 2020.
It's already begun. All right, my friend Nida Khan, thank you so much for coming in. Where are you on Twitter?
Thank you for having me.
Quickly.
It's Nida Khan NY, so it's NIDA KHAN NY.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Be back tomorrow. All new live show right here on the Dean Obadala Show.